I've been married to my wife for 38 years, and in all that time, I never once came home to find a stranger standing in my living room taking photographs of the fireplace, until the Tuesday before my 65th birthday. Let me back up. My name is not important. What is important is this. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer. I built 3 homes with my own hands, including the one my wife and I have lived in since 1994, and I have never, not once in my adult life, failed to notice when something in a structure was wrong. A hairline crack in a foundation, a load-bearing wall that's been quietly compromised, the kind of damage that looks invisible until the whole thing comes down. I should have seen the cracks in my own family sooner. My wife and I have 2 children. Our son, who lives in Portland and calls every Sunday without fail, and our daughter, who married a man I never fully trusted but learned to tolerate for the sake of keeping the peace. Her husband is the kind of man who laughs too loudly at his own jokes and always seems to be calculating something behind his eyes. He sells commercial real estate, has for 15 years. He knows property law the way I know load tolerances instinctively, reflexively, always in service of the deal. I should have paid more attention to that. My wife and I had planned a quiet birthday week. Nothing extravagant. We owned a small cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, a place we'd bought 22 years ago for almost nothing and slowly turned into something beautiful. Hand-laid stone on the porch. A wood-burning stove my son and I installed one November weekend. A view of the ridge that turned amber and gold every October like clockwork. We called it the Quiet Place. My wife painted a little sign with those exact words and hung it by the front door the summer we finally finished the porch. The plan was simple. Drive up Thursday. Spend 4 or 5 days. Celebrate my birthday on Saturday with a pot roast and a bottle of the Bordeaux we'd been saving since 2018. Come home Tuesday. My daughter had called 2 weeks earlier to say she and her husband couldn't make it. Work commitments. I didn't press. Honestly, and I say this with the complicated love of a father, the week sounded better without the tension her husband tends to bring to every room he enters. What I didn't know was that my daughter had a different plan entirely. I left a day early. Thursday morning I woke at 4:30 with the particular restlessness that sometimes hits me before a long drive. And by 5 I had the truck packed and the coffee in a thermos, and I decided there was no reason to wait. My wife was planning to come up Friday with her sister. I'd texted her the night before to say I might leave early. She'd sent back a heart emoji and told me to drive safe. I made good time. The mountains were still in morning fog when I turned off the highway. The gravel road up to the cabin is about a mile long, winding through second-growth oak and hickory. And there's a bend near the top where the trees open up, and you get your first look at the front porch. I saw the car before I saw anything else. A dark gray SUV parked at an angle near the front steps. Virginia plates. A bumper sticker from a real estate association I recognized from my son-in-law's office. I stopped the truck at the bend. Sat there for a moment with the engine idling. There was no reason on earth for my son-in-law to be at my cabin on a Thursday morning in October when he had told me when my daughter had told me that neither of them would be coming this weekend. I turned off the headlights. I drove the rest of the way slowly, pulling around behind the storage shed where the truck wouldn't be visible from the front windows. I don't entirely know why I did that. Some instinct. The same instinct, maybe, that makes you slow down when you're walking through a building and something in the air pressure feels wrong. I sat in the truck for another minute. Then I got out and walked around the side of the cabin. The curtains in the main room were pulled back. Through the window I could see my son-in-law standing near the stone fireplace. He was talking to someone I didn't recognize, a woman in a blazer, holding a tablet, nodding as he spoke. She had the posture of a professional, the posture of someone who measures rooms. My son-in-law was pointing at the ceiling, then at the windows, then at the view. He was giving her a tour of my cabin. I stood very still for a moment. There was a sound in my ears, not quite ringing, more like the way the air sounds right before a storm front moves in. Everything slightly pressurized, slightly off. I walked to the front door, and I opened it. They both turned. I want to describe my son-in-law's face in that moment very precisely, because I have thought about it many times since. It moved through 3 distinct expressions in under 2 seconds. First, the automatic smile he gives everyone, the salesman's reflex. Second, something that was not quite recognition and not quite panic, but something between the two, a recalibration. Third, the thing he settled on, which was a performance of casual surprise, as if I had walked into a room where nothing unusual was happening at all. "Hey," he said. "Didn't know you were coming up today." "Clearly," I said. The woman with the tablet had gone very still. She was watching us the way people watch 2 unfamiliar dogs in a room together carefully, ready to step back. "This is a colleague," my son-in-law said. We were in the area. I wanted to show her the place. I hope that's—" "Get out," I said. Not loudly. I want to be clear about that. I didn't raise my voice. I am 64 years old, and I have been in rooms where things were failing structurally, professionally, personally, and I have learned that the most effective thing you can do in those moments is become very quiet and very precise. "Excuse me?" he said. "I'd like you both to leave my property," I said. Now, the woman closed her tablet. She didn't say anything. She walked to the door and went outside, and I heard her car door open and close a moment later. She had the good sense to recognize a situation for what it was. My son-in-law did not move. "Look," he said, and I could hear him shifting into the register he uses when he's trying to manage a deal that's going sideways. Smooth, reasonable, slightly patronizing in a way he's learned to make sound like patience. "I should have called first. I get that. But I've been thinking about this property, and I really think—" "You've been thinking about this property," I said. "The market up here is strong right now. Like, genuinely strong. A place like this, with the acreage and the view you're looking at, this property is not for sale." He looked at me for a moment. Then he did something that I will not forget. He smiled. Not the salesman smile. Something smaller and more deliberate. "You know," he said, "you and Mom aren't getting any younger. This place is an hour and a half from the nearest hospital. The maintenance alone, I mean. You mentioned yourself last Christmas that the roof needs work. At some point, you have to think practically about—" "I am thinking practically," I said. "I am practically asking you to leave my cabin." He left. I stood at the front window and watched the gray SUV back down the gravel road. I did not move until I couldn't hear the engine anymore. Then I sat down in the chair by the wood stove, the one my wife reupholstered 3 summers ago in a dark green fabric that she said matched the ridge, and I stayed there for a long time. I am not a man who panics, but I am a man who understands structural failure. And I understood in that moment that what I had just seen was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom. You don't bring a colleague with a tablet to tour a property on a Thursday morning in October for no reason. You don't do that unless something has already been planned, unless conversations have already been had, unless documents may already exist. I called my son. It was early, not yet 7. He answered on the second ring. I told him what I'd found. I tried to be calm and factual, the way I'd learned to present findings in engineering reviews. "Here is what I observed. Here is what it suggests. Here is what I think we need to know." There was a long silence on his end. Then he said, "Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for about 3 weeks." I sat back down. What my son told me took about 20 minutes and covered the following. His brother-in-law had, over the past several months, been making inquiries. Not just about the cabin, about all of it. He had spoken to a financial advisor, not our financial advisor, someone else, about the liquidity of our retirement accounts. He had looked into a continuing care community about 40 minutes from our house. Not in a casual, long-term planning way. In a we should tour this soon way. My son had overheard a phone call. My daughter and her husband, late on a Sunday night 2 months ago, when he had stopped by their house unexpectedly to drop off a birthday gift for their youngest. He'd let himself in through the side door they always leave unlocked. He'd stood in the hallway and heard his sister say, with a kind of business-like efficiency that had apparently stopped him cold, The cabin alone should cover at least 2 years of their fees, and once we get POA sorted, the rest follows. Power of attorney. My son hadn't heard the full context. He'd told himself there might be an innocent explanation. He'd been sitting with it for 3 weeks, trying to decide if he was misunderstanding something, the way you sometimes want very badly to believe that what you clearly heard is not what you actually heard. "I should have called you immediately," he said. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really sorry." "You're calling me now," I said. "That's what matters." I spent the rest of that day at the cabin doing 2 things. First, I called our family attorney, a woman I've known for 20 years who handled our wills and the original purchase of the cabin, and I told her what I'd found. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Don't sign anything. Don't let anyone into that property without you present, and keep records of everything. Dates, times, what was said." She told me she'd look into whether any inquiries had been made to the county recorder's office regarding the property title. Second, I went through the cabin carefully, room by room, the way I used to go through a new construction site before signing off on it. Nothing had been moved or disturbed as far as I could tell, but I found, in the small desk drawer in the back bedroom, the drawer where we keep spare keys, and the utility account information, and the documentation for the well pump, a business card. Not ours. A woman's name and a residential sales brokerage logo I recognized from the signs that had been going up in the valley. I photographed it. I put it back exactly where I found it. My wife arrived Friday afternoon with her sister. I had thought carefully about how to tell her. And I had decided that the most important thing was to be direct, without being alarming. She is not a fragile woman. She taught high school history for 31 years and has dealt with things that would rattle most people. But this was her daughter. I knew it would land differently than it would for me. I told her at the kitchen table with coffee. I told her everything, in order. I didn't editorialize. I just laid it out. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. Her sister reached across and took her hand. "She talked about the continuing care place," my wife said finally. "I thought she was just being thoughtful. I thought she was planning ahead." "She may have been," I said. "But thoughtful planning doesn't involve bringing a real estate colleague to tour our property without asking." My wife nodded slowly. She had the expression I've seen before, not devastated, not in denial, but moving through something methodically, rearranging what she thought she knew against what the evidence actually showed. "What do we do?" she said. "We go home as planned on Tuesday," I said. "We act normal. And in the meantime, our attorney is working." Our attorney was, indeed, working. By Monday, she had found something. A title inquiry, a formal request to examine the ownership status of the cabin, had been submitted to the county recorder's office 6 weeks earlier. The name on the request was not my son-in-law's. It was a business entity, an LLC, with a bland, forgettable name that, when traced through state corporate registration records, listed my son-in-law and my daughter as managing members. They had formed a company. Together, for purposes that were not yet entirely clear, but that our attorney described as consistent with preparation for a property transaction. I want to be precise here, because I think precision matters. At this stage, no crime had necessarily been committed. Making inquiries is not theft. Forming an LLC is not fraud. But the shape of it, the secrecy, the timeline, the conversations my son had overheard, the business card in the drawer, the woman with the tablet on a Thursday morning, the shape of it was unmistakable to anyone willing to look clearly at it. We drove home Tuesday as planned. My wife and I talked for most of the 3 hours. Not with anger, or not only with anger, but with the kind of honesty that becomes possible when you stop trying to protect someone from what's true. We talked about the patterns we'd each noticed over the years. The way he'd steered conversations toward real estate at every holiday dinner. The way our daughter sometimes went quiet when certain topics came up, a quietness I'd read as boredom or distraction, and now read differently. The time, 2 summers ago, when he'd asked me carefully, almost in passing, if I'd ever thought about putting the cabin in a family trust. I'd said we already had a trust. He'd said, "Oh, right, of course," and changed the subject. He had been planning this for a long time. What came next took about 6 weeks and involved our attorney, a forensic accountant she brought in, and eventually a very uncomfortable Sunday dinner that I had requested my daughter and her husband attend. I had debated how to do this. I won't pretend I wasn't angry, because I was. But anger has never been the most useful tool in my kit. What I wanted was clarity, accountability, and as much as possible my daughter to understand that there was still a path back if she chose to take it. She hadn't signed anything. He hadn't either, not yet. The inquiries and the LLC were preparation, not execution. Our attorney believed that if we addressed it directly now, we could close the door before it became something we'd have to involve law enforcement in. I chose to believe that about my daughter, that she had been led somewhere by the man she married, and that she still had the capacity to choose differently. I could be wrong, but she is my daughter. They came for dinner on a Sunday in November. My wife made a pot roast. It was, deliberately, as normal as possible until it wasn't. After dinner, at the table, I took out the folder our attorney had prepared. I put it in the center of the table. My son-in-law looked at it. His face did the 3 expression sequence again: smile, recalibration, performance of innocence. My daughter looked at it, and then looked at me, and went very still. I walked through it, calmly, methodically. The title: inquiry. The LLC. The business card in the drawer. What my son had overheard. The conversation about power of attorney. When I finished, my son-in-law started talking. I expected this. He is a man who responds to cornered situations by generating words. As many words as possible, the way some animals generate ink. He said there had been a misunderstanding. He said he was trying to protect us, to make sure we had options, to be proactive about planning. He said my son must have misheard. He said the LLC was for something unrelated. I let him talk until he ran out of words. It took about 4 minutes. Then I said, "I'm not asking you to explain. I'm telling you what I found, and I'm telling you what happens next." What happened next was this. My son-in-law agreed with our attorney's letter on the table in front of him to dissolve the LLC within 30 days. He agreed that neither he nor my daughter would take any action regarding our property or our finances without explicit, written, witnessed consent from both my wife and me. He agreed that if any such action were taken without that consent, we would pursue every legal remedy available to us. My daughter didn't say much during this. At one point she started to say something, and her husband spoke over her, and I watched her close her mouth, and I felt a sorrow about that is separate from and older than the anger. At the end, when her husband had gone out to the car, she stayed at the table for a moment. Just the 2 of us. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "I know," I said. He said he kept saying you and Mom weren't being realistic, that you needed someone to make the hard decisions. "We have been making hard decisions since before you were born," I said. "We don't need someone to make them for us." She nodded. She looked at the table. "The cabin is yours," she said. "I know that. I know it was wrong." "Yes," I said. "It was." She left. I don't know what her marriage looks like from the inside, and I've thought about that often in the months since. I know what I saw at that table. A woman who had been convinced by someone she trusted that wrong was practical and practical was necessary. I don't know how much of it was her and how much of it was him. I'm not sure it matters right now. My wife and I went back to the cabin the following spring. We replaced the section of roof that needed replacing. I hired a crew, but I was up there every day, checking the work. My son came for a long weekend, and we finished a small deck extension we'd been planning for 3 years. His kids caught their first fish off the dock on a Saturday morning, and my wife stood at the kitchen window watching them, and I stood next to her, and we didn't say anything for a while. My 65th birthday came and went. We had the Bordeaux. It was excellent. Our attorney has the LLC dissolution on file. She also has a detailed record of everything that was found and everything that was agreed to. Not because I expect it to be needed, but because I built my career understanding that structures must be documented, that the written record is what protects you when someone later claims they don't remember what the plan was. I'm 65 years old. I am not elderly. I am not confused. I am not in need of someone to make the hard decisions on my behalf. I carried a mortgage for 30 years. I put 2 children through college. I have read a seismic survey report and an IRS audit and a medical diagnosis that wasn't what I wanted to hear, and I handled all of them. The only thing I regret is not moving faster when I saw the first crack. Because here is the thing about structural failure, the thing I learned 30 years ago in a field I loved and gave my whole working life to. By the time something fails visibly, the damage has almost always been there for a long time. The question is never whether you'll see it. The question is whether you'll look. I looked. 38 years of marriage, 2 children, 1 cabin on a Virginia ridge, and I am still standing in it. I am still watching the light come over the trees in the morning. I am still the one who decides what happens to what we built. And that, I think, is exactly how it should be. If this story moved something in you, if you've seen this in your own family, or if you're afraid of it, or if you're somewhere in the middle of it right now, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments. Because the only way we protect ourselves from this is by talking about it, by naming it, by refusing to let it stay quiet. Take care of each other. Take care of your parents. And if someone tells you that you're too old to make your own decisions, look them in the eye and look them carefully. And remember that wisdom is not measured in how young you are. It's measured in how clearly you see.